Hey, this is Ryan Steele, and you're listening to the Give and Go podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Host Mitch Shreve, along with the two basketball gurus, Ryan Steele and Ben Sperry. As we record this now, we're gearing up for Final Four weekend, and we're down to our Final Four teams. We have Houston and Baylor, and then UCLA, the Cinderella story of the season, starting on the first round of games against the huge favorite in this case, Gonzaga. Which I only had Gonzaga in my original Final Four, but I guess that doesn't really matter. When you take it away, go.
I just want to mention this. If you go back into like college basketball history, even 20 years, let's say, how weird would it be to say you have the Cinderella story of the season, UCLA taking on the overwhelming favorite Gonzaga in a Final Four matchup. So, I mean, it's just interesting how far college basketball has come, how far Gonzaga has come to be everybody's favorite to go unbeaten for the first time in forever. And the fact that UCLA, which, is an 11 seed, so it's somewhat of a Cinderella story, is considered an underdog in this game.
Mm-hmm.
How about Houston being back in it after, they had Phi Slamma Jamma, but I don't think they were relevant for a long time in college basketball. Even Baylor's a relative upstart, I would say, at least in our lifetimes, in terms of being a really good college basketball program on the men's side. So, it's going to be an interesting Final Four from a historical relevance kind of perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think Baylor's been good for a while. Maybe not, Final Four good or top five good, but Scott Drew, they've been good there for a few years now. As far as these matchups though, and I really can't speak with any sort of conviction here because I had UCLA losing the first four in game against Michigan State, and that's a tournament. They they cling on and hit a shot and force an overtime against Michigan State, or they're out before even they get to the first round. Mm-hmm. And here they are, and shout out to Mick Cronin, man. I've been a huge Mick Cronin fan since he was at Cincinnati. Always has great defensive teams. He for whatever reason, he just gets those kids to buy in, and it just shows. They play such great defense. I think the Juzang kid, the transfer from Kentucky, I mean, probably player of the tournament so far. Yes. They have a lot of other good players there. The Tiger Campbell kid, but a lot of young guys too. And I think they're a bit ahead of schedule as long as some of those guys don't leave. They've been awesome though.
Yeah, I agree. And then when we go to look at the women's Final Four, we have what I believe it is UConn and I'm going to have to look this up now. I'm drawing a blank on who UConn plays. I'm still stuck on that UConn Baylor game from the other night. And so that's
which was honestly better than the men's games that night. I know we were all watching and us three were chatting about it and kind of talking about, plays here and there or down the stretch. And obviously, Paige Beckers, man, like, what can you say? It sounds funny just because this girl was doing step backs and crossing over. Like, yeah, she's that. Like, she is that good. And me and Ben were even saying towards the end, like, they're getting down the shot clock with 6 seconds and she hasn't touched the ball. She just has to get the ball early in the shot clock and just be involved in the offense because only good things were happening when she was touching the ball.
Yeah, and so I have a couple thoughts about the game. And I'm not going to say I'm the biggest women's basketball fan in the world or anything like that, but I really enjoy watching it, maybe more so than a lot of guys do. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this game was it was back and forth, hyper competitive, and really it was two teams that probably should have met either in the Final Four or in the national championship. Yeah, right. Baylor is really, because of last year's COVID, situation, the defending national champion in a way.
Yeah.
And they actually gained a player. Carrington, who was maybe their best player the other night, was actually a Stanford transfer. And, so they added another really good player to an already really good team. They had a real chance to win down into the last play where there was not a foul called. But I agree. Paige Beckers is something to see. She keyed a big 19-0 run. I think she had like 10 of the points in that run.
Yeah.
But what she's so good at, and impressively good at, considering she was kind of more ball dominant in high school, is moving without the basketball. And that's great because UConn's an equal opportunity offense, a lot of cutting.
Yeah.
But it does seem like when the game's on the line, you want the ball in her hands a little bit more or a little bit earlier. Because, UConn missed some free throws down the stretch, not to talk about some of the other girls that had the balls in their hand and ended up missing those free throws. But you kind of she could have had the ball in her hand the whole time if they would have got better shots in those last couple possessions, if she would have been the one getting to shoot the free throws, and it wouldn't have been down to is it a foul or not kind of situation on the last shot of the game.
And what's crazy is, the girl that missed the bulk of those free throws is, other than Paige, is kind of their best player. Kristen Williams is a dog. Like she was making a ton of plays during that run as well. Reverse layups, cutting through the defense. She's really good. I think I saw Gino after the game kind of talking with her on the side after they won, kind of coaching her up. And I think that was just, getting ready for the Final Four to just forget those free throws. But you're right. They missed some free throws down the stretch.
Yeah.
And I loved watching the Carrington and Paige Beckers matchup. That was fun to watch. I thought Carrington actually did a very good job defending her for what she's been able to do. So that was a lot of fun each possession down the court when she had the ball in her hand, because it was a battle. And speaking of that foul, I would like to get your two's opinion on whether we think that was a good call, if they should have been called as a foul, if there was any validity into that.
So, technically, if you watch a replay, the hands weren't straight up. So that's a foul in terms of the textbook definition or rulebook definition. But to me, and we've debated this in the past in different groups we've had when we chatted about games at the NBA level. There's kind of leeway in the last couple seconds. You don't want to see a game decided by free throws unless it's so obviously a foul that you have to call it, right?
Right.
If it's chintzy, if you're looking to draw a foul in the last couple seconds, that seems kind of cheap. And it did kind of seem like Carrington was throwing her body into that situation. So I can see why it would be a no call, and I think I'm okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, by letter of the law, it has to be a foul. They fouled her. Two things, though, and this is one thing that's always, kind of made me laugh about officiating in the basketball level, is we will forget the 20 other bad calls throughout a game that had an effect on a game. But we will only remember the last one. So if you watch that fourth quarter from 7 minutes on down, there were probably 4 or 5 calls that, from a person with no rooting interest, just watching as a fan of basketball, I was like, man, UConn is getting hosed on some of these calls down the stretch here. Like, that's kind of crazy. They called 2 fouls, 2 bailout calls for Baylor. Now, I think they only made 2 of the 4 free throws down the stretch, but just shots where even the coach for Baylor, Kim Mulkey, was like, calm down. Like, why just flailing their bodies and throwing up garbage shots and getting
Carrington
bailed out.
was one of them too, right?
And then that one doesn't get bailed out. You run to a double team wall, and their hands came down for sure. But the quality of look that was, I don't know if it deserved the call, but it was a foul. If we're being fair, it was a foul.
And my big thing was, and I think I even said this to my wife because we were watching it together, was because I said as soon as it happened full speed, I said, oh, there's no way that's a foul. I said they were in position, they were straight up. And then you watch it again on replay. Yeah, you saw the arms were, about a 45-degree angle. But I said you can't expect the refs to call that in that situation, especially when, and I still think that Carrington, like you said, Ben, kind of initiated the contact and threw herself into that. But It was
This is years ago now. Like I'm saying, like 6 or 7 years ago. But I remember distinctly a play one time because we had a friend that was a big Harden Houston fan for whatever reason. I think it was because Dwight Howard was there. But it was a play where Tim Duncan blocked Harden's shot with like 2 seconds left. And it looked in live action like it could have been a foul. They didn't call it. But then you look at the replay real close and he didn't get him. But he was so convinced that this was a foul, right? And then they got completely and totally hosed. And my point was like, well, if you expect, just to run your body into somebody in the last second of a game to win, I don't know if that's, the best way of winning a basketball game.
Do I know who this person is?
Oh, of course.
Shout out, Danny.
Danny Cokerman.
Love you, Danny. Hey, real quick, I mean, not to jump off the women's tournament, back to the men's.
switching gears.
Switching gears. We got off it kind of quick. The Houston squad here, I think as good as Baylor is, and that's the best team they've played. If I'm Houston, I'm a little excited to see that because they just got done facing 2 straight games of junk defense. Like they did have almost a week to prepare for Syracuse, and that's a tough zone to go against when you don't see it, the way he coaches it, the way they play it and stuff. And they handled it well. They cut it up. They did really good. And then you only get 1 day to prepare for Oregon State, and they're throwing 1-3-1 at you. They're switching matchup on you. They're extending the 1-3-1 to half court, and the guys following the ball. It's a tough thing when you're not seeing a man-to-man defense night in, night out in a tournament. So kudos to them just for surviving 2 just crap defenses they never see. And now you go to Baylor, who they'll throw in zone, but they're a much more, man-to-man oriented team. Scott Drew coaches the no middle type style. They force everything baseline, everything, down the wing and stuff. So if I'm Houston, though, I'm excited. Like, I don't gotta see a friggin' 1-3-1, a 2-3, let's just ball. I think that's gonna be an awesome matchup. A little, Texas matchup there is pretty cool.
Do you think though that Houston's a little? I mean, by the same token, are they a little untested for NCAA tournament Final Four team when they play as many lower seeds as they played?
Possibly.
I mean, how often does a team get to play all double-digit seeds is what I'm getting at.
Oh, no, for sure. It has happened. I mean, I can't just sit here and tell you the year, what team it was. It does happen, but that's the thing. Look at UCLA, man. That's they knocked out enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, yes, are they untested? Yeah, we can say that. But they've also seen teams that beat and upset teams because of these weird issues. Buddy Boeheim, Mitch was, bragging him up. Wasn't Mitch? What did Houston come out and do? They locked his ass up. Yeah. He could not get open. He struggled. He started getting a rhythm in the second half, but he couldn't do much. They had him, and that's what Houston, I think, does so well. The Giroux kid, he's such a good defender. They got length. They killed both teams on the offensive glass, and I think they can do the same to Baylor because Baylor's not a big team. I honestly think that's going to be the best game of these last 3 games if you count the championship game.
Do you think anybody can beat Gonzaga at the end of the day?
If Gonzaga plays even their A- game, no.
Yeah.
If the Zags are off and they panic, or I don't want to say Mark Few will panic, but just knowing this is probably the best shot he's ever had. I mean, in 17 they were there. They were down 2 possessions with like a minute and a half left. They were right there. They're down 5 or something, and Carolina pulled it out. But this is probably his best shot. So if they get panicky or flustery or a guy gets in foul trouble, we've seen it happen in the tournament. I think that's the only way they can lose. Because if they play their best, they're just too talented at every level, inside, outside, everywhere. So
it will, and being the gym teacher in my school, I get a lot of questions like this, and people know I coach basketball too, but they say, so Gonzaga's undefeated. And I said, well, at this stage, that doesn't mean anything. Cause when because on any given night, I think there's honestly a chance, like look back to that North Carolina Wofford game that happened a few years ago. Wofford just shot the lights out. And North Carolina actually, if you look back, didn't play terrible that game. They actually played decent, but it's just when you can shoot 70% from the field it's hard to be beaten. There's any given team in college basketball has that capability if they get hot and catch fire. So the way UCLA's been playing, all it takes is if you can bang a lot of threes and shut, Gonzaga down on, if they have a bad shooting night, anything can happen.
And that's where I see UCLA's chance. They gotta bring it into the mud. They gotta, and they play that way. They're a slower team. Mick plays a little more slow defensive. Them kids buy in, man. They play hard on defense. I think they got to do that extra physical. Juzang has to be great. Tiger Campbell has to be great. The Jockheads kid has to make shots, and they just got to hope and pray that a couple, that some of these kids have an off night and they can bring it down to the mid 50s, low 60s. Because if that game gets up in the 70s, forget about it. It's a wrap. It's because Baylor can play that game with them and keep it close. They're probably the only team that's left. But UCLA, if that game gets up in the high 60s, high 70s, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
Which brings me to this point. If Baylor and Gonzaga end up in the final against each other and it ends up being a high-scoring game, I think I can still win our tournament pool.
Oh, my God. Well, good for you, because I know I can.
In all full disclosure, honestly, I haven't even looked at it because I know that I'm probably dead last in that. I
haven't looked at that since the first night I filled it out.
Gave up on it.
I told you I'm not the prediction guy, man. Yeah. I don't do predictions.
And not to give us whiplash or anything like that, but going back to the women's side of things, I never did answer it. It is UConn and Arizona. And then on the other side, it's South Carolina and Stanford.
Yeah. And remember earlier this year, the South Carolina versus UConn game was a really good one. So, there's a chance that they could reprise that and have a really good national championship game. I think, it's overwhelmingly likely that UConn gets there again. At least the national championship, and then we'll see what happens. And I'd also want to shout out Paige Beckers being named Women's National Player of the Year as a freshman, which, believe it or not, even some of the greatest UConn women's players of all time didn't do, including Diana Taurasi and Maya Moore, who didn't win until their sophomore years. I will say, though, that both of those came into situations where there was already a national player of the year on the team.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different situation. This is a very young UConn women's team that will presumably only get better because they're adding the best high school basketball women's player, Ozzie Fudd, next year.
Did you see the workout with her and Paige Beckers on Instagram the other day?
Oh, I'll send you the
link. Good. It was crazy.
Yeah. Well, so she's from the DC area where I live right now.
Yeah.
One of my buddies does personal training, and he's seen her work out in the gym that he trains at. And he said, I went up to her once and just said hi and keep up the good work because I didn't think she really needed any help from me.
Dude, she's quicker. She's quicker, shiftier, and a quicker handle than Paige.
And she can
now
shoot.
Paige is taller, and she doesn't miss, dude. She's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
They will be. There's also an interview with Maya Moore, Diana Taurasi. I watched yesterday. Did you see that?
I think I know what you're talking about with her and Sue Bird, or no?
Well, it was just her. Sue Bird did one too, but it was. They were asking about, Paige and what she was as a freshman compared to Diana, and Diana was like, there's no comparison. She's like, I came to UConn a good player, I barely played my freshman year. That was okay, get in there now, you can play. She's the best player in college her freshman year. She's my freshman year I could score. She goes, but she can pass and make everybody so much better. No freshman guard at UConn, she said, has done it like that. So that was big praise from who I consider the best women's player ever.
Right. Now, the only thing I would say is she gets her stats a little bit juiced, perhaps, because of the situation comparatively to some of the previous UConn women greats, right?
Yes.
If you're on a team where, Sue Bird's already a national, women's player of the year as the point guard when Taurasi comes in, or, I think it was Tina Charles was there when Maya Moore was there, and she was, the best a women's basketball player in the post around. So, it's a different situation. So she has more opportunities to score than
She
maybe
does.
some of these previous freshmen. But it'll be interesting. That's why I wanted to mention Ozzie Fudd coming in, because it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, whether her stats will actually like stay the same, go down slightly, but they become even more dominant.
Yeah,
in the
which
next couple
honestly
years.
is probably going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the stats will probably take a little bit of a hit, and they'll.
But what's
just be
crazy
so
is her
much more
efficiency
dominant.
is so high. It's not like her volume was like screwing up her efficiency. Like I can't imagine like you want her to actually take less shots when she's shooting 45% from three and over 55% from the field or whatever it was.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, hey, this is a good point to take our first break. Hey, while we're recording this, it is the evening of April 1st, 2021, and I'm going to call it the day that a little bit of my spirit died. Roy Williams announces his retirement from college basketball. So we're going to get into that when we get back from the break. This is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Stick around. Thanks for listening to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. As I stated right before our break, one of my personal heroes, longtime North Carolina, Kansas college basketball coach Roy Williams announced his retirement today. So let's just get some initial. We're going to dive deep into this because if you've never watched this show before, Ryan and I are huge North Carolina fans. So we're going to cover this topic pretty extensively, talk about his legacy a little bit, and then even dive into who we would like to see take over the helmet at North Carolina. So kind of the outsider to this one, we'll start with Ben. Ben, your thoughts on the great Roy Williams retiring?
Well, actually, I thought it was humorous earlier today when you said, "Is this really happening? Is this an April Fool's joke?" And we didn't even know. Like Steele and I had to look up on ESPN what you're talking about.
Me too.
And then it was like, "Oh, Roy Williams announced his retirement." That's kind of wild.
Well, I was at practice actually this morning, and so I had left my phone. We were inside. I had left my phone on one of the bleachers, and I had been throwing batting practice, so I hadn't checked it or anything. And then, when I come over, it was like the first thing on my phone, and I kind of let out an audible gasp, was how I'll describe it. But I was a little bit in shock.
Yeah. So, I mean, and obviously you can speak maybe more to his legacy. I think one of the things I'll remember about Roy Williams was way back in the day when he was still with Kansas. And I think he just got done coaching a national championship game. I think it was the Kirk Heinrich, Nick Collison team.
Yep.
And they asked him about the North Carolina job because I think it just became open, and he was all angry that he was even asked the question because obviously
he was fired up. You're right. He was.
That was one of my first memories of Roy Williams was when he had that interview and was really upset about the question even being asked. But he brought North Carolina back to prominence in a way, right? Because there's a few down years in the early 2000s, and then they became a powerhouse again for most of the rest of our high school and college, and that until really now, years. So I think that's going to be a large part of his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's like a sad day. Like I was talking to a friend who's also a Carolina fan today, and it's not like somebody died, but in a way, it's like the death of an era, or it's like you'll never get it back. You'll never talk to that. You'll never talk to that person again. We'll never have that same feeling that we had. I guess my big thing and some of the things I loved about him was just how good he was with the kids. And, we were talking before he came back from break, and just how he always took all the fault. If they lost, it was his fault. If, something happened down the stretch of a game, it was on him. It was never on the players. He took the brunt of all that and gave the kids all the credit. I think that's huge in coaching, especially college, when, you have such, a huge responsibility for kids that really, you hold their whole future in your hands, kind of. He was just so good with that. Kids that wanted to test NBA waters, and most coaches, we got to run it back. You got to come back. We win with championship if you come back. Oh no, Roy was texting every NBA scout, letting these kids know, no, you can't come back. You got to go now. The NBA. I think that's some of the stuff I love the most about him. And just like Ben said, yeah, he brought UNC back to prominence. We went from down years to immediately being a power. With Roy, it's just funny. It's almost like Steph Curry. Steph Curry is going to shoot threes. He's going to step back. James Harden, he's going to step back. You just can't stop it. Roy Williams' teams were going to pound you on the offensive glass. They were going to run secondary break, and they were going to run in transition. You knew all of it. You didn't have to know any plays. You just knew that. Yeah. And you can't stop it. And I think that says something about, I remember a while ago I heard a thing like Dean Smith said, when Roy was at Kansas, that Roy ran Carolina stuff better than Carolina did. It was super cool thinking of stuff like that about Roy.
And from a coaching's perspective, I'll mention I'm a huge fan of secondary break and running into all your stuff offensively. So that is something that I appreciated watching over the years. Especially when, and I think of the little guys over the years, like the Ty Lawsons and the Raymond Feltons, and then in a very, very different way, what was his name? Kendall Marshall, because he he threw it ahead rather than running it ahead himself. And just the different ways those little guys, those point guards, made it happen by pushing the ball up the court.
Mitch, your thoughts, man?
I loved your analogy about how the death of the era and how you're never going to get that back, and it's funny to me that you mentioned that, because my brother, being the Duke fan that he is, said I think they should hire Matt Doherty, and that made me laugh because I don't know how many people realize, but actually the base of Roy's first national championship team were actually guys that Matt Doherty drafted. So, or not drafted, but recruited. So I was, okay, that's funny. But you're also story about how he would always call NBA scouts and NBA coaches and be a recruiter. It reminded me of Danny Green's story and how Danny wasn't always he was thought pretty highly of himself and didn't always push himself and didn't always want to make himself better. And Roy told Popovich that, and Roy, he didn't hold back. And I think that's part of the big thing he picked up from Dean Smith was he's just the most honest guy with you. And he would tell the kids in his office and in his meetings and stuff like that, he'd tell them exactly what he was thinking. And I think that goes a long way and shows his character and how he was able to get guys to buy in. And I think that was what was kind of the big shocker to me in his announcement when he said, I'm not the right guy for this anymore, because he just couldn't get the kids to buy in anymore. So I think it's actually pretty humbling that he's putting the program and the athletes, above himself. And, you think about all the millions upon millions of dollars that him and his wife and family have given back to the students and scholarships. And, him alone this past season funded the tennis programs and stuff like that with the money that he donated. So I think he's just an overall good man. And, it's just a sad day for Carolina basketball, but, I guess all.
So you touched on a part that I found kind of most interesting about the day was the actual press conference, where we've seen coaches in the past retire because, of age, health, they want to go out on top, they win, they retire, stuff like that. I found this, like you said, humbling. I found it kind of sad, honestly, because here's a guy that didn't quit because, I'm having health issues, or, he quit because he believes in his heart that he's just not good enough anymore. I don't remember too many times seeing a high-level coach go out like that. It was remarkably sad to me. That's what I took away from the press conference, that he sat there and just said, I'm not good enough to do this job anymore. And we're thinking, I've seen comments all day on social media, Carolina is not what it once was. okay, well, I mean, they were in the championship game in 16 and lost on a buzzer beater. They won it in 17. We're a 2 seed in 18, a 1 seed in 19, and they've been bad for 2 years.
Yeah.
I think we just forget, like, okay, he just won a championship 3-4 years ago. I mean, so I think he's being a little hard on himself. Now, we can get into this a little more. I don't know when he says, Mitch, when he says, I'm not the right guy for the job, okay, that's pretty open door. Do you think he knows who the right guy for the job is? Do you think he thinks there's a potential, replacement for him?
I do, because he had already said, he said in the interview today, I caught it was just a quick one-liner, but he said he already put in his 2 cents with Bubba, and I'm referencing Bubba Cunningham, who's North Carolina's athletic director. He's already had meetings with him, and I just read an article, and I didn't realize this, but he had decided 10 days ago, and I guess he did mention that in his thing, he decided a while ago that he was retiring. So this had been a long time coming, and long time meaning a week, but so I think that he's already had meetings, and I think he has a successor in somebody that he wants in there to do it. And I'm wondering if it is more of you take a look at the direction of where college basketball is heading with the one and dones, or even just the guys who want to stick around for 1 or 2 years, and how, college basketball is starting to become a, 4 small guards, small ball is transitioning, less big guys. And Roy has always been I'm going to bring in a crop of guys, have them for 4 years and let them dominate. I'm going to have 2 bigs on the floor. And I'm just wondering if he's starting to realize that his style of basketball is and like Mike Krzyzewski's made the change, Boeheim's made the change, Roy's not the changing type. He's going to stick with what he knows and goes with it. So I'm wondering if, he doesn't know. And I think I have an idea of who it is, but we can get into that part later. Those are just my thoughts.
Do you guys have any more thoughts on the presser or the retirement itself?
Give me a second on that. Ben, do you have anything?
I mean, no, not really. I mean, I don't think just because I'm not the North Carolina fan you guys are that I have.
Well, no, for sure. I 100% agree. I mean, I think I just wonder, like we just started to talk about, where does UNC go now? I mean, it's a big time job. So I'm just saying, in my lifetime, I've seen this job open up only a few times. Mm-hmm. When Dean Smith retired, they gave it to a long-time assistant, Bill Guthridge. And then, obviously, when Bill Guthridge, they gave it to a UNC guy and Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty wasn't so hot. They lured Roy from Kansas. He's had the job now for a long time. So, really, they've had Carolina guys now for forever, since Dean Smith. Mm-hmm. I think we see that trend continue, but I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina is making calls to, Mark Few. I've heard Billy Donovan, Scott Drew from Baylor. There's a slew of big time coaches I think deserve, UNC's call, at least. Even if they hang up on them, you got to make the call. But myself, Mitch, I would love to see Hubert Davis get it.
Yes.
Stay in house. That's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. See, and I don't disagree with you on that. I think there is a bunch of guys out there, and to be honest with you, the thing that I think me personally, I want to see it stay within the Carolina family. Or, what I keep coming back to, maybe Roy thinks that it's time to get away from that and bring in new blood. And I don't know if that's what he's thinking or not, but, I kind of have my pick or picks for an outside hire. But I think when you look at staying within the Carolina family, there's only really 3 names. I guess you could extend that to 4, but it comes down to Wes Miller, Jerry Stackhouse, Hubert Davis, like you said, and then Steve Robinson. Which I have a feeling Steve Robinson might even retire with Roy because they've been together for so long. So that
Jerry's an interesting thought because he's had some success coaching in the G League and some other places too, right?
Well, he's currently the coach at Vanderbilt. They haven't been great, but I think it's just what's the direction, because like Hubert's never been a head coach, but he's been under Roy Williams since 2012. Carolina guy, knows all the stuff, knows the players, probably has recruited for Carolina, so he knows the recruiting trail in Carolina. Then you got a guy in Wes Miller who has ran a program for freaking 10 years, basically. He's been at UNC Greensboro, done a pretty good job for them, got him to the tournament twice. And then Stackhouse, kind of newer to the college game, but obviously, you got – that could help recruiting in itself, just being Jerry Stackhouse, an NBA guy who, kids might know or remember, or, hey, I know this NBA player I just, was talking to. He might have a little pull, as far as recruiting goes. But, I mean, go ahead.
I read an article about Jerry Stackhouse today, and the article said that X's and O's wise, he's very good. But his biggest downfall is the recruiting. Okay. And I think, like you said, if he goes back to North Carolina, that just ups the game. And then the article said that they think X's and O's wise, North Carolina should hire him. And then he just needs to surround himself with 2 good assistants who are good recruiters that can bring some of those guys to him.
Well, do you think in a situation like that, where they brought in Stackhouse, would he keep the rest of the staff that's already there and just? And
that's honestly what I was thinking in my head as he was saying.
And that's my question too. So, we kind of talked about it. Me personally, I would like to see Wes Miller come back because he's he's a young guy. No offense to Hubert, but Hubert.
Oh no, you're right. He's 12 years younger than Hubert.
Yeah. So he's 50s, 60s. I think late 50s is where Hubert's at.
Hubert's
Davis,
50.
Okay.
And Wes is 38.
Wait, Hubert Davis is 50?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Damn, that means we're getting old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wes Miller's 38. But I mean, 38 for a Division I college coach, you're young, and he's been coaching for about 10 years now. So,
and he's had a lot of success there. So I think and being young, he might be able to relate to some of the younger guys. He's a decent recruiter for being at UNC Greensboro. Yeah. So, he can bring in. I think he can, and like you said, if he can come in and get Steve Robinson and get Hubert Davis to stay on as assistants. So he's kind of the guy that I want to see right now. I would love Hubert too if we got Hubert. Yeah. Nothing against Hubert, but I think Hubert Davis is the guy that Roy is pulling for. And why that is because, Ben, you mentioned that interview where Roy got all offended when they mentioned it. So anyways, when they got rid of Matt Doherty and wanted to bring in Roy, Dean Smith actually called him and had a heart-to-heart with him and basically said, I wouldn't be calling you if we just didn't need you here in Carolina. And it was kind of the conversation where Roy said, how do you say no to that? And came. Well, when you look at Hubert Davis, who had a great analyst job at ESPN, was probably bringing in, a couple $1 million a year doing it. Roy Williams called Hubert Davis up and said, I need you here with me, come coach with me. And he came. So part of me thinks that that's who Roy wants just because he had him in mind the whole time. And he does lack Division I head coaching experience, but he doesn't lack head coaching experience because he's been the head coach of North Carolina's JV team, which plays like D3, some bigger D2 school or smaller D2 schools maybe. So he does have some collegiate head coaching experience. So
hey, shout out to D1 JV teams. Come on, man.
Yeah. Well, North Carolina is one of the few that has them. So I think like I said, I would like to see Wes Miller come in there, but at the same time, Hubert, I think it might be Roy's pick, and I'm not going to disagree with Roy Williams. But as far as outside the family, outside hires, does anybody have a personal favorite? Ben, this might be more your domain.
Well, let me ask you like this: like when you talk about like a Mark Few or a Scott Drew, and really maybe I think of Mark Few even more for this question. Do you, if you're that guy, right? Say you built Gonzaga from a Cinderella story to mid-major power to just playing the best team in college basketball and one of the best teams every single year in college basketball. Yeah. Do you even look at anymore, even North Carolina, even a blue blood school is a huge step up from what you've created. Maybe if you're Scott Drew, maybe, because you made Baylor into a really good team, but Baylor, North Carolina, I don't know. But if you're Gonzaga, the coach of the Gonzaga team, that's now as much of a powerhouse in the recruiting area as any team, as much as a blue blood almost, it seems like, as any school, is that even a step up anymore?
Yeah, and it's crazy to say, but I don't. It's step up in legacy. It's step up in, like you said, a blue blood compared to a team that's, generationally, it's a new power. We're talking a team that's only been a power since 07, 08 maybe. And Carolina's been a power since, the 60s. So it just depends, right? Let's say Mark Few loses to UCLA this weekend. And now he's still chasing a championship. And now maybe he thinks, hey, I've got this recruiting thing out west on lock. I get the guys I want now. I got my system. I got my everything in place. I'm good. Maybe he does start to wonder, they got big time donors at Carolina. They got all this money. They got all these, alumni. They got this. They got that. Maybe
Jordan
I try
Brand,
that out.
Everything.
But I think you're right. The Scott Drew thing is a little more interesting as far as I think that is a step up. Baylor has never won anything. This is the furthest I can remember Baylor's men's team ever getting. So you have them on a roll, but a Carolina job is a Carolina job at the end of the day.
So I'm gonna do a little name dropping right now. Throw a little scenario at you, and it's actually a PA guy. So, you have a guy who, about the same time we were around where we were in high school, built up a smaller basketball program, D1, into a powerhouse. And he leaves for a struggling powerhouse type school. And I'm referencing John Calipari, where he had D Rose at Memphis and built up Memphis into this big basketball program. And then
Western PA guy, believe it or not, went to Clarion.
Yeah, went to Clarion. But then, he ends up leaving that for Kentucky, who was struggling at the time. And then, but again, went for the legacy of, okay, I'm going to Kentucky. So I could see some of these guys leaving, even like a Bill Self, I could see Mark Few leave just because, again, they've built up their own, but you're going to North Carolina, where Dean Smith and Roy Williams coach, where you can just take a kid into the Dean Smith Center and just say, look, and that's going to draw the kid in. So I think it's, who was it? I think Bubba Cunningham said, we have the number one basketball job opened up in the country right now. There's nobody who won't be interested. I think to some extent there's some degree to that. And guys we were talking about it earlier, like Brad Stevens, somebody like that. There could be, my Roy Williams is under the table right now. If you can't tell me shaking, he's shaking the table on me. But, I think there could be some NBA guys that might want to make the return to college. And, I think, we asked about outside the family pick. I think Brad Stevens would be my outside the family pick, because I love what he did when he was at Butler. And I know he hasn't had quite the success in the NBA, but I like him as a coach.
I mean, he's been to the NBA Final Four quite a few times already.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Good point. Ryan, I know you're not a predictions guy. You going to make any predictions here
for
Carolina
who? Coach?
Yeah, for Carolina coach. I know you said you want Hubert, but
I think they stay with a Carolina guy, whether that's somebody in house or like we talked about, a Wes Miller but it all depends. I think if they have a shot to get a big name guy who is a proven winner, a proven elite coach, they will do that. But outside of that, I think they will stay in house.
Ben, do you have any final thoughts on it?
No, I think it would be interesting to see what happens if they can draw, especially if they can draw one of these really successful coaches from another college program.
All right, final thoughts in general. It's time to wrap this thing up. Ryan, final thoughts?
I'm looking forward to the Final Fours, both men and women's. I know we talked a little bit about UConn, but South Carolina has really been the power kind of women's basketball lately. And Dawn Staley, shout out Dawn Staley, man. Like the stuff she does there, and speaking out about social issues and women's rights issues in general. I'm a big fan of South Carolina, so I'd like to see them do good. And on the men's side, I'm pumped, man. I think that the Texas battle is going to be the best game we've seen, and I think the Zags though are just so tough to beat right now. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Ben?
My prediction is your Final Four player of the years are going to be Paige Beckers and Jalen Suggs, who incidentally grew up in like the same area of Minnesota and apparently have a friendship that dates back to like junior high. They played basketball together even growing up.
Didn't know
Pretty
that.
Cool, right? Yeah, there's an ESPN story about it recently.
That is interesting.
I should read more.
I didn't. Yeah. Hey, all I got to say is God bless Roy Williams. Brought some national championships back to North Carolina. Wish him the best. And then, as far as Final Four goes, I got to pull for Gonzaga because they're, my national championship team that I picked, and they're the only team I got left. So if
so
I
did
have
everybody
any shot
else,
at,
though. So
yeah, that's true.
Right.
Good point. So, hey, again, if you like our stuff, make sure you continue to follow us, like us, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're streaming on all platforms. We still haven't got on Apple Music yet. We're still working on that. Hey, don't be afraid to email us. Again, we can't stress this enough. If you want to get us your thoughts out there, email us, thegiveandgo3@gmail.com. We'll be happy to take questions, answer anything you might have for us. This is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. We'll see you next week.
I'm Ben Sperry, and this was the Give and Go Basketball Podcast.